If you have watched any of the videos on our channel, you may know that inbreeding in royal families was viewed as a way of maintaining genetic purity. Intermarriage between noble families ensured that no commoner genes tainted pure aristocratic bloodlines. What could possibly go wrong? While all these families expected close marriages to keep their royal families stronger, illness, insanity, and infertility due to inbreeding ended up weakening them in many cases. This video will show you 5 monarchs who had defects and mutations caused by inbreeding. We begin with an obvious example, the Spanish King Charles II, the last of the Habsburg line. The outcome of a lengthy Habsburg inbreeding lineage, Charles II, dubbed the Bewitched, suffered from congenital problems right from birth. His family was in shambles when dealing with consanguinity. Charles was his own mother's first cousin and his father's great-nephew. His grandmother was also his aunt, therefore his entire family tree came from a single couple, Philip and Joan of Castile. Charles II was known for having what was termed a Habsburg jaw or Habsburg lip, featuring an oversized tongue, a deep bite, a protruding lower jaw, and a coarse lower lip. The deformity is technically known as mandibular prognathism. His tongue made it difficult to chew and resulted in excessive salivation, so he often stood with his mouth half open, drooling constantly. He also had a slow development, having difficulty speaking even as an adult. He was breastfed until the age of 5 and never had any formal education. He was also sexually impotent, and his inability to procreate brought an end to Habsburg rule over the Spanish crown when the king died in 1700. Alexei Nikolaevich, the only male child of the last Tsar Nicholas II, inherited a genetic disease called hemophilia and is next on the list. His hemophilia was a contributing factor to the 1917 downfall of the Russian imperial dynasty. While no one in the Russian House of Romanov was a hemophiliac, a potentially fatal genetic disease where the blood fails to clot normally, Alexei's father, Tsar Nicholas II, was married to Alexandra Feodorovna, the granddaughter of Britain's Queen Victoria. It is thought that Queen Victoria herself passed on hemophilia to the European monarchies. She was a carrier who passed the disease onto the Tsarina's mother. However, the disease did not occur in women, only in men, so Prince Alexei inherited the disease from his mother. In despair to save her son's life, Alexandra sought mystical intervention with Gregory Rasputin, a monk who professed to have divine powers. Having invited a lecherous man like Rasputin, renowned for his taste for alcohol and all kinds of mistresses, was not to the liking of the aristocracy. But the Russian rulers were persuaded that Rasputin's treatments were effective in saving their son. The mystical Rasputin grew in influence at court, wielding more power over royal life and ruling Russia behind closed doors. The disarray in the royal household and the dubious company of the rulers contributed to the Russian Revolution of 1917, and, as a result, the entire royal family was put to death. Let's go back a long way to discuss the pharaoh Tutankhamun, better known as Tut. Despite being quite famous, Tutankhamun had a truly short reign. DNA tests on King Tut's mummified body reveal that this Egyptian ruler from around 1300 BC was in fact a weak-bodied genetic misfit due to the Egyptian royal tradition of marrying brothers and sisters. King Tut assumed the throne when he was just 9 years old and only survived until he was 19. He probably had a cleft palate, crooked feet, and scoliosis, along with an elongated and deformed skull. The first time the boy pharaoh's body underwent a digital scanning process was in January 2005, when the mummy was taken out of his sarcophagus and transcribed using 1,700 images from a CT scan. This investigation was focused on understanding the probable causes of Tut's death. The CT scan taken revealed that the pharaoh had sustained a leg injury a few days before his death. The possible theory for his passing was that he may have had infectious complications generated by a leg injury during a hunting season, which made him contract malaria. The other theory is that King Tut died from an infection in his leg following a serious chariot crash. But there is still much to be studied on this matter, which has yet to be settled. Right now, we cannot determine how Tutankhamun died. It may very well be that what killed him left no evidence. One thing is clear, in his early age, he had several problems brought on by genetic diseases. For our second spot, we will talk about King George III of England, who was known as the Mad King. With a reign famously marred by the loss of the American Revolution, King George III probably had a genetic disorder that impacted his mind more visibly than his body. He is believed to have suffered from porphyria, a disease that turns a patient's urine bluish-purple and leads to bouts of insanity, although arsenic poisoning and bipolar disorder were also suggested as probable causes. George III regularly deserted his royal duties to slip away to private seclusion and recovery at Kew Palace. He was prone to delusional ramblings and was subjected to extreme treatments throughout his life, including straitjackets, leeches, and ice baths to calm him down. Contemporary medical testing shows that porphyria was a common occurrence in the highly inbred House of Hanover, to which King George III belonged. He spent the last decade of his reign in hiding and eventually lost his sight and hearing, dying on January 29, 1820. To round off our list, we now come to Ludwig II of Bavaria. Just like his cousin, the Empress of Austria, King Ludwig II of Bavaria was part of the old Wittelsbach dynasty. For generations, the family had practiced inbreeding, and its effects were leaving their mark. While Ludwig was known for being out of touch with reality, he chose to live in a fantasy of his own making, something that would have been fine if he had not been king with the job to do. While he built castles and navigated swan-shaped boats, the Bavarian government was pulling its hair out over its king's ineptitude and profligacy. He was born in 1845 and spent his childhood dressing up, acting and cutting himself off from the rest of the world. He became king at 18 without any formal training or experience and shunned his position as head of state for the rest of his life. King Ludwig II's most enduring contribution to world history may be the construction of Neuschwanstein, the German castle that went on to inspire Walt Disney's plans for the Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty castles. Ludwig lavished all the royal income on these projects, borrowing heavily and ignoring all his ministers' attempts to thwart him. This was then used against him to have declared insane and deposed. He was found dead in an eerie circumstance the day after his arrest, together with the psychiatrist who had pronounced him deranged. His death is still considered highly suspicious. Today, we are going to have a bonus. We will talk about Ferdinand I of Austria, who suffered from a series of mental and physical ailments, but reigned for 13 years. Ferdinand was the eldest son of the Holy Roman Emperor Francis II, later Francis I of Austria, and Maria Theresa of Naples and Sicily. Due to his parents' genetic proximity, they were first cousins, Ferdinand was affected by epilepsy, hydrocephalus, and neurological problems. He was born in 1793, and, as misery loves company, he also had the Habsburg jaw and a tongue too big for his mouth, while his body was too small for his head. Nevertheless, he ruled between 1835 and 1848. Ferdinand relinquished his rule in December 1848 in favor of his nephew, Francis Joseph I, due to the liberal revolutions. He went on to live in Prague Castle until he died at 82 in 1875.